recording. And mark down who is here. Doesn't look like many people as usual, but that's okay.
I made it.
Good. All right. Okay. At this point, we're going to go over chapter 16 today. There's not a ton of stuff in here. We've really mentioned a good bit of it already, I think. It is network security fundamentals. And then next week is chapter 17 or module 17. And that's where they're going to have you build a small network. And basically what they're going to do is just put together everything you've looked at through the book as far as when you've done the packet tracer labs and where you were using stuff, and now just put it all together in one big thing. Next week's, I will not count for a grade. This week's discussion is the last discussion I've got for the semester. But I do have a collaborate session. I will have one scheduled for next week, and I will go over 17 at that point. So,
Cool.
You don't have to attend it next week, because you're not getting a grade on it, but you're welcome to attend it. And I'll be going over the stuff and recording as usual. Okay. Any questions on that?
Yes, sir.
This next week is the last full week of the semester. There's actually 2 weeks from yesterday is the last class day, which is May the 3rd. And then May the 4th and 5th on the school calendar are final exam days. Your final exam will be available from May 1st, which is Saturday, through May the 4th, which is that Tuesday, which is the first final exam day. You would take, according to the final exam schedule, you would take a final exam on one of those 2 days, and that different classes would be set at different times. I haven't seen it in a good while. There used to be a schedule out for when the finals were supposed to be given for classes on campus, so that you didn't end up with finals on top of finals. And also to keep students from having all of their finals, unless their classes happen to all fit on like Monday, Wednesday, or whatever, to keep them all from falling on one day. But I haven't even seen that in a while, but right now we're predominantly online anyway. If you have not registered for summer, you need to register as soon as possible. And that we've got 2452 running in summer, and then a number of other classes. But we've got some classes that are low enrollment, although we have not started registering new students yet, and enrollment doesn't look bad for the whole college, but we're going to have to be making some decisions on different things in the near future. So that's where that one is going to be for.
Well, you let, if a class is closed, would you let those students allow them to get into a different class of the same number?
Yeah, if we close a class, if it's a case of we close a section, that then we check with the students and see if they want to take it at the other. Usually, though, in CIST, when we're closing sections, if it's an in-person section we're closing, usually we have an online, and what we usually do in that case is just move the people to the online and give them the option to not stay in that class if they don't want. So that would be that situation. But now, like the next class for this, the 2452, it is online and it's definitely going to run. Okay.
Cool.
It's just, if we don't get some more enrollment on it, though, pretty soon, that it might be where, as far as my load, it might only count as part of a class for me on a load, because we got to have either 12 or 15 students in a class for it to be count as a full load for me. And if it's less, then they combine the some lessers together. So hopefully that'll get up to a full load. And I think 12 is the number now, but I'm not sure. They've bounced that number around a few times too. So I never do know. All right. So that means Monday the 3rd, if you've got anything left to turn into me or tests to take, that's all got to be done by that day. Okay. The final exam will be due on that Tuesday, so you still got that Tuesday to take the final exam, but it's due by the end of that day. Your lab final, which, did I put it out there or not? Let me look and see, because I just thought of that. I've actually been working on, I've got grading all caught up, but I'm not sure.
If we've got like there's 3 packet tracers in the class, and we do 2 or 1, and we didn't do the other 2, we still have time to do those?
If there were ones you missed, however,
Yeah.
keep in mind that there is a 15-point a week penalty.
Oh, shoot, man. It's probably down to
Okay.
0 now. It was section 11.
So you'd have to calculate it out of how many weeks ago that was, because we have done, I think we did 2 in 1 week on the other week. Yeah. So, and then the week we were out doesn't count against you either. So
well, shoot, let me try to get it done today. Right on. I'll do it. I just thought it was too late.
But I do take stuff late. That's what I had in the syllabus. But it's a 15-point a week.
All right.
All right. The skills lab, I'm gonna have to double check to make sure this is the right skills lab for you and get it out there for that lab final. Okay. And I'll try to do that right after we get off from here, and then that'll be available, and y'all can start working on it.
Is that for the final? Is that for the final, the skills lab?
Because you've got a lab final to do, which is going to be skills lab. I'll change it. Try to remember to change the name of it to lab final, because they call it skills final on Cisco, but I've called it lab final all along. So I need to change the name of it there in Blackboard to lab final. But you do have that one that you've got to do, because that's 10% of your grade right there, and that's one of those mandatory things. Because remember, it is mandatory. You have to do the lab final and you have to do the final exam. Now, they didn't say you had to pass either one of those, but you have to do both of those. It's Cisco's requirement. Okay. And then however it all averages together based on the system I've got for averaging grades.
And you'll have that out there this week or next week?
The what? The lab final?
Yeah.
Ideally, I will have it out there within the hour after we get out of this session.
Okay, cool.
Okay, I'm going to try to do it right then. I do see I've got an email I got to answer as soon as I get off with y'all. That I just got in from publisher that they finally decided. I've been trying to get an appointment to talk with them for a few weeks, and they're finally giving me a couple of dates, and I got to tell them only one of those dates is going to work, and it's got to be that one, because it's about something I'm going to do actually before their second date, or at the time I think it's actually at the same time as the second date, and I need their input on, so I got to answer that one. All right, any other questions on all of that? So those are deadlines on it. I don't do a discussion in the last week, because that would be due that Monday night, also on May the 3rd. And then we've got graduation on that Thursday, May the 5th in Rome, and I'm going down there to it. So I'm supposed to have off half a day in exchange for it, because obviously it's going to take me an hour to drive to Rome and drive back, and it's going to take a couple of hours standing there watching graduation, which is drive-through graduation. And then grades are either due to be turned in by me either on Friday morning by 10 o'clock or Monday morning by 10 o'clock. I'm not sure which, but I'm aiming for the 10 o'clock Friday morning, because that next week is the chance for me to take any time off. The other one is I've got to get classes set up for summer by then too, because we start back on the 17th. So we got that week with the finals and other stuff in there. So for students, it looks more like about almost 2 weeks break in there. For the faculty, it really is essentially a week in there that we have as a chance to take annual leave. So I'm going to try to get stuff done. So that's going to be a rather hectic week. And that's why the deadlines are absolute deadlines as we come down to that. And that I would rather be that if you're turning in stuff late, that you get it in as quickly as possible, because I really don't want to see a pile of stuff all of a sudden come in on the afternoon of May 3rd. Stuff that's due at that point, that's no problem. But that I'll end up with some students trying to turn in a whole pile of work all of a sudden there on May 3rd, and you can see I've got a full week at that point scheduled.
No, I'll do it tonight.
So please be aware of that one. Okay. So chapter 16 looks at network security fundamentals. Some of this stuff we've already talked about in this course, that I've mentioned some of these things to you that they go through and talk about. If you've taken 1601, which is fundamentals of security, you've actually gone through probably just about everything in this chapter, or what you didn't go through is what we've covered already. Sorry about that. So they're going through and just giving you a brief introduction to network security. Okay. So if you notice, it's network security fundamentals. So the first thing they talk about, they go to talking about types of threats, but the first thing I'll mention to you is a term they're going to use through the chapter is going to be threat actors. And threat actors, by their definition, is anybody that does something that could be a threat to the network. Okay? That includes ones that we normally do not think as threat people, but they get fitted into there anyway. So they include in threat actor everybody that's got the name of hacker in terms of where they attack networks. Okay, so white hat hackers, black hat hackers, gray hat hackers all fit into threat actor. Phishers are threat actors. Spammers are threat actors. Realize phishers is PH, not F. That people out there fishing on the lake are not a threat actor to our network. White hat hackers are actually ones that attack your network and such things, being paid to do it, and that they're finding your weaknesses and telling you what your weaknesses are, and that they're part of you as a general rule. So you don't normally think of them in terms of being threats against your network, but they could, because they know how to break into it and stuff. So that's why they include them as threat actors, is that they could easily change over to gray or black. Gray ones typically are that they're not employed by you, but they're making attacks on networks just to find the vulnerabilities and tell people about what the vulnerabilities are on their networks. But they're not being paid to do it or working within an organization to do it. White hat ones are purely, that's what their job is and that they're doing for an organization. Okay. Black hat hackers are the ones that are definitely the bad people, because they're the ones attacking your network and trying to destroy it or manipulate it or do whatever to it. So realize through the chapter, they're going to talk about threat actors that covers everybody. The phishers are obviously the people that send out the emails that then are trying to get you to click on something and give up information and go find that information off of people. And then the spammers, obviously, sending out all kinds of junk mail, etc. too. So there's lots of crossover on these things. So the first thing they talk about is that there's 4 types of threats as they define it. Every security book you go to is going to define these slightly differently, and sometimes have more, sometimes have less, but it's basic. Information theft is where they're stealing your information. Okay. Then there's data loss and manipulation. But information theft is where they break in and they obtain that confidential information. Data loss is where they break in to destroy and alter data records. Ransomware being a very typical one of these on it. The other one is realize with ransomware today that what often happens is that they don't just go in and encrypt everything on your network, but the first thing they do is steal all your information. So you've lost your data. That has just been theft of your data, but they also have encrypted all your data, so you've lost it. You don't have the data anymore. Okay, because in information theft, they steal the data, but you still got the data. But somebody else has got it too that shouldn't have it. So a lot of times what they will do now on ransomware is they go in and actually steal your data and then encrypt it all and then try to get you to pay fees to them to get them to supposedly destroy the data on their stuff, and to give you decryption keys. May or may not in both cases, but if they go and steal your data, that they're quite often going to be turning around and selling it on the dark web. So then the third one is identity theft, and that's just where they're trying to get people's identity, like social security numbers, bank account numbers, and so on. So then they can use it to go steal all kinds of stuff. And there's obviously lots of that out there. And then disruption of service is the last one they mention, and that's one I've mentioned to y'all before in here. And that's where we have the denial of service attacks, and where they make an attack upon a server or your network to get it where it's so busy doing other stuff that now people cannot use it. So they've disrupted the service there. If it was a business running, that they're trying to, in a lot of cases with this one, cause the business not to be able to do what they do as a business, so they're hurting them on it. All right, vulnerabilities is the next one they mentioned to you, and that is weaknesses that are in your devices and network. Okay, and so that's just a weakness there that could be attacked. Doesn't mean that it is attacked, but it is there. Okay, so they go through and give you some different type vulnerabilities out there on it. TCP/IP protocol weaknesses is one they mention, and they mention about certain protocols are insecure almost all the time, like HTTP, ICMP, FTP actually they put into that one too, SMTP, and so on. And so there's a number of them that do have weaknesses in them that are just there, and that they really don't have any way to get around that because of how they're so much publicly used. Operating system weaknesses is the second one they mentioned to you. That is a big one. Particularly Windows tends to have from it, but the others all do also. And you got to remember, Windows 10, the code for it is tens of millions of lines long. So there's going to be things that just happen in there that nobody quite realizes because of how all these pieces got to fit together. So they mention on that, they mention about the different operating systems and about CERT keeping up with all of it. The other one I will mention on that one too is the 0-day attacks, and that is where a weakness has been found, but the whoever's made the system, whether it be a program or an operating system, is not aware of it yet. So that's a 0, and that the attackers become aware of what that vulnerability is and attack it before anybody even knows it's there. So that's a 0-day attack. Microsoft is continuously putting out things they learn about on Windows and all their other products that are to take care of those. The bad part is people don't always patch those security patches real quickly, and that there has been some major attacks done on things that were a 0-day vulnerability. Microsoft knew about it, put out a patch to correct it out there, and then it was taken advantage of by some people that became aware of it several months later, and a huge amount of computers got impacted by it. And Microsoft's comment is, if you had been doing your updates and installing your patches like we've told you to, you would have been protected on that one, and that everybody that had didn't get hurt by that, that everybody that hadn't got hurt, and that you had months to get it in before these people actually did something with it. A lot of other times, they're hitting right there when it becomes aware of it, and that Microsoft's hitting on that too. Network equipment has the same problems with it. That the OSs on them and everything have problems also, and some of the devices can actually have within them. Unsecured user accounts is another vulnerability, where people are sending stuff across not encrypted when they should, or that they got poor passwords. And remember, studies say, I don't know if this is totally true or not, but things I keep reading claim that 70% of people have passwords that are password. I don't think it's really quite that high, because you got plenty of organizations that block that. But you need to make sure that user accounts are secured. The other one is on that about user accounts, and that actually goes with the next one of system accounts with easily guessed passwords, and then that if that occurs, people can get into the actual system and get in as administrators and everything, and that happens all the time. But the other one on unsecured user accounts is there's plenty of places that have employees leave, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, that don't disable their accounts. I just got told this weekend about somebody that had left an organization several months ago, and actually had been let go. And they've discovered that their user account and password is still active at that organization, and they were actually had a position of authority in it. And that they also found out from some employees were telling them, oh, they haven't even changed any administrator passwords around here from when you were here. And so they know what the passwords are to get into all of that equipment in that organization. And it is a good size organization that I was talking with the person about on that case. I've heard about it in plenty of other places, and that people don't disable them. Now, you want to disable user accounts, not delete them. Two reasons. If you disable them, and if there was a security issue or something that you, or a legal issue that you were letting them go on, you can still get into all of their, everything's still there, so you can get into and look at the logs and trace things and everything else still there. Second one is that if you hire somebody else to do the same identical job, say I decide to retire, and if they disable my account and then they hire somebody else a week or two later, that they don't have to go through and figure out what all did we let Dr. Watt have access to and what didn't we, and get it all set up correctly. They can just change that account over to that new person, and they're often working just like I was often working, that they got the same rights to them, and so that makes it much simpler on that. Misconfigured internet services, where you've got the settings on your different services set up incorrectly, and so there's openings all over the place on it. So that's one to be careful of. Unsecured default settings and products, that goes back to passwords also on them, but they're the default settings that nobody's gone in and fixed them to set them to the way they need to be. And sometimes default settings are good. Sometimes default settings do absolutely no protection. Now I know, like, I'm taking an AWS solutions architecting, I believe is the name of it, and that they pointed out that when you create an AWS S3 account, which is where a lot of data is stored by a lot of people, by default on it, they have actually got it set where it blocks anyone else access to that bucket of data unless you change to allow others to be able to access your data there. And that they actually have it set where it's defaults to where it's set purely private, belonging to that one person. That's all that could access it. Lots of other programs take a different approach. It's open and the wild, wild west on it. And then misconfigured network equipment, that things have not been configured correctly, and that opens up weaknesses and such on it. Policy vulnerabilities, they mention a few of those down here. Lack of a written security policy. Here's what I would tell you on that one also. Besides having a security policy that's written, make sure people can get it and read it and know what in the world is in the policy. Having a written one that nobody ever sees doesn't do you a whole lot of good either, because then how are people going to follow it if they don't know what it is? And I've been at places and here at the school, I don't recall ever being able to see or having seen the security policy for the college. So what we're supposedly told we can't go into, or what we're supposed to be doing or whatever, we've never really been told exactly on that. When you log into the school computers, there is a message pops up and tells you that you got to use the internet for only business purposes and a couple of things, but it's rather vague and it's the general policy from across the state, but we need some more specifics to that. Politics definitely enters into policy vulnerabilities of where people say they need to be able to access things they may or may not be able to need to access, etc. So it needs to be consistent no matter who the person thinks they are. Lack of authentication, continuity, that goes back to poor passwords mainly. If you got poor passwords there, that allows unauthorized access to the network. Logical access controls, none applied. So setting your controls on all of the stuff to that only people that should be accessing different devices and such are able to. Software and hardware installation and changes that do not follow policy. That policy should tell you about what things people are allowed to install and what things they're not allowed to install. And then you may well have people installing things they shouldn't install. I see that all the time. Lack of a disaster recovery plan. Have a plan of what in the world are you going to do about your IT systems if disaster occurs. That includes backup in there. So one, have the backup. Two, if a disaster occurs, can you get to the backup? And where are you going to use the backup? When I worked at the Cloister at Sea Island Company, which is down by Brunswick, it's on an island out there in the Atlantic Ocean, that you go across St. Simons and you go across the little road over to Sea Island. That I was a night operator there back in 1980, and we were told we had to do backups every night. One of the things we were told was if we were told to evacuate the island while we were working, the requirement was we had to take the backups with us. And they were to stay with us until we were allowed back on the island or supervisors got a hold of us and got those backups from us to be able to start doing stuff again from wherever. That was a disaster recovery plan on it. When I worked at Swainsboro Tech and ran all the computers there, part of my disaster recovery plan was every school in the state was running the same type mainframe. And I actually had contacted several other schools about it, and that we had done basically a mutual aid thing, but no documentation really on it. That if something happened to our computer or our building, that we could take our backups and go to the other school and work and use their mainframe during the night while they weren't using it, and then they would use it for their purposes during the day, and that we would be able to get the information that was all stored on there and keep on going. So for instance, if the school burned down or the hurricane came through and knocked everything out, and I actually had talked to a school in North Georgia and a couple of schools closer to me down there, so that I had some coverage on that if it was a weather type thing. So you need that out there too. In our area, obviously one of the things you ought to plan on it is a tornado coming through. They supposedly don't come through very often, but we've had several in several years up here, obviously. That we had the big one 10 years ago, but we've had several more just within the last year and stuff, and done some damage. Physical security, they talk about that on it. And they talk about types of physical threats, and they break them into 4 groups. Hardware threats, where it's damage to your actual equipment. And that's where ideally you keep it behind locked doors, but like cabling is out where people can see or do stuff with. So you want to figure out ways that you can protect all of that stuff the best you can. Environmental threats. What happens if it gets too hot or too cold? Have you got things built in there to not let it get too hot and too cold, was their example. Electrical threats. Have you got UPSs and other devices to, maybe UPS is going to actually generate power for you if the power's off, but do you have ones that just stabilize it and so on across there? And that takes out where you have drops and surges and everything. So you need that planned in there too. Maintenance threats, about how you've got that all set up. They mentioned for one thing that there is that, like on cabling, all labeled. Is the cable going into the switch box all labeled, so we know which cable coming out of that switch goes where? So if it appears that we've lost a port on our switch, and so there's one device that's not working, can we figure that one out real quickly and know which one it is? Or are we going to disrupt everybody as we unplug one after another and people get disrupted from doing their work? So just be aware of that. Then they talk about network attacks. They talk about types of malware. They've broken it into 3 categories of viruses, worms, and Trojan horses. Viruses are programs, malware that inserts a copy of itself into other places, infects those different ones, and that it travels from computer to computer. Virus is also a wide term that actually a lot of times gets used to cover everything we're talking about right here. Worms are similar, but they replicate themselves, and so but they do damage like viruses, and so, but they can just replicate themselves all over it in there, where a virus needs something to carry it around on it. And then Trojan horses are programs that are put in there to work at some other point in time. It may be that they're designed that they're going to go off and do their damage at a certain date and time, or when a certain event occurs. And the people will set those up for all kinds of things like that. And the name of them, all of those names are significant in what they've been called. Viruses work like viruses, just like we've heard all about this year with COVID, because that's a virus. So it's spread from one to another, and something spreads it from one to the other. Okay. Worms are like actually earthworms in that they just sort of spread themselves. And I don't know, most people have done this at some point, but if you cut earthworms in two, they actually become two animals at that point, or two worms, and keep on going. And that's the sort of idea of what they've called worms here. And then Trojan horses, coming off of the Greek mythology about the group from Troy, that attacked some other town, and they did it through building this huge horse that they gave to the other town that took it inside their walled town, and it was filled up with all of these soldiers. And after it sat in there for a day or whatever, it opened up and they attacked the people from inside the town and won the war. That's the same idea here. Then they talk about Renaissance attacks, and they actually say about network attacks can be broken into three categories. They sort of got this headlined wrong, but there's Renaissance attacks, access attacks, and denial of service attacks. Renaissance attacks is where they're not doing any damage to you. They're just going in and looking around and figuring out where are all your vulnerabilities. It's just like a person that's going to rob a bank goes by sometimes, goes in the bank and just observes on the bank and figures out when the money is most available in there, and when the security guard goes to lunch every day, for instance, and that there's nobody in there guarding it. Although you really don't see as much security guards in banks nowadays as you used to. When I was growing up, I remember every time you went in a bank, there was always an armed security guard standing there at the door. So that's all they're doing, is going in, looking around at your network, mapping it all out, figuring out what all the devices you have, but they're not doing anything. Access attacks is when they do their unauthorized manipulation of the data of the system, getting in, and the user privileges, and they're actually attacking and they're doing damage. And then there's denial of service attacks, which I talked about before, back when we talked about ICMP and some other places in the book. And that's where you've made an attack upon a network or a server where it's sending tons of certain type messages, ICMP, ping messages being the most common, and that it locks the system down because they're high priority and it can't do anything else. And so then you got denial of service attacks, and you've got distributed denial of service attacks. So those could be using pings. You could do ping scans to also find all the port scans, to discover what all the ports are open and all that stuff as you do your reconnaissance. Then when you're doing those access attacks, there could be password attacks. Brute force attacks is where you just sit there and literally guess the password. Trojan horse attacks could be another one on it. Packet sniffers, to just listen to the packets and see when people send packets across, passwords across using Telnet instead of SSH, so they're not encrypted. So you steal it at that point. Trust exploitation is where people go in and appear to be something else, and there's a trust of them that there shouldn't be a trust there because they're actually a threat agent. Man in the middle attacks often works off of that also, but it's where somebody gets partway between things that are being transferred across, and that they're in the middle of it all and are picking up and see what all's going on and can redirect stuff, etc. to it. Denial of service attacks, like I say, I've already mentioned those. Backups, I've already mentioned those. The defense in depth approach that they mentioned to you is that you don't just have one layer of defense, you've got several layers of defense. So you've got a firewall coming into the network, you've got a firewall on the devices, you've got your UPSs on devices. So like my PC here at the office, and actually my PC at home, I've got UPSs on, so if the power goes out, I'm okay. And that you set up all different types of protections all around on it, so that if they get through one, that you've got something else there that can block them next, that it's not just a one layer approach. Backups to me are very critical, and that you need to know how often you need to make them, and what that number, how you determine that one is, figure out how much information you can lose. If you can lose a day's worth of information, then do your backups once a day. If you can only lose 30 minutes of information, then you need to do backups every 30 minutes, and so on that approach. Where are you going to store these backups? They need to be stored. You could store some backups on site, but you also need backups stored off site, because you may well have backups stored on site, which I have done, along with off-site backup, because then that's the quickest to where you need to retrieve things that something happened to it, that it just got a file got damaged or whatever, and you can get it back real quickly. But the off-site backups need to be off-site, so if something happens to that facility, you still got the backup. And I have known organizations that did not store the backup off-site or had no backup, and they lost their building and lost their, and then that was where all of their information was. They lost the business or organization. Security on them with the off-site backup, that's gotten more important now too, but a lot of times it does not appear to be that secure. For instance, when I was doing that at Swainsboro Tech, I actually kept the off-site backups at my home. It's not locked or anything, but it was a different location. It was locked in my house and stuff, and that different agencies said that was plenty secure. Other organizations, they're been directed to keep them in safety deposit boxes and stuff. But my comment to those people was that we didn't need to do that. It wasn't that level, and that it was secure by keeping it in my house, another place in town. Then that made it it wouldn't definitely rule it out, but made it unlikely that both my house and the school was going to be wiped out and whatever. Okay, so you can do things on that, but beware of that. Upgrade, update, and patch. I really mentioned that at the beginning to you. And upgrades are where it's improvements in the product. Updates is where it's things that are going to make corrections and changes and stuff to it. And then patches are fixing things, that small things in there, it could be big things too, but are making very specific fixes to it. Microsoft does a Patch Tuesday, which I believe is the second Tuesday of the month, each month. If you go back in time on them, they used to put out patches all the time along with their upgrades and updates. And that was driving the IT people crazy, because they were having to do updates, it seemed like every day on some products. Now Microsoft has gone to the approach of, unless it's an emergency patch, that they put them out once a month on the second Tuesday. The idea of the second Tuesday is, remember, if we put right now at this point in time, if we go around the world looking, part of the world is probably sitting in yesterday, and part of the world, and then whatever time of the day it is all the way around the world differently on 24-hour segments. And then at other points, it's part of the world's tomorrow and part of the world's still today with us. So they did Tuesday because then that means that at that point it's early in the work week, but it's not before they come into work that week, that it will be on that Monday or Tuesday, wherever they are in the world, when they release it from out there in Washington. Okay? So do post your patches, like I told you earlier. Then they mention about AAA, authentication, authorization, and accounting. Be aware of those three. Authentication is where the user has identified themselves and has been authenticated. They are who they say they are. And that's literally the words that you'll see most often on it, is that the person is who they say they are. You're doing that through passwords, through iris scans, through numbers that have been sent to their phone that they put in, etc. And that is purely a way that you're determining they are who they say they are, so you know that. That's all authentication is. Authorization is after they've authenticated, so you know who they are, that you're giving them access to the things they need access to, but not anything else. So what are they authorized to use? And that you're giving them access to that at that point. And then accounting is where you keep records of where you've done both of those other two items, about who is it you've let in, and when have they been in, and what were they authorized to use. And that way, when things are misused, you can figure out who it was. Firewalls, they do a brief mentioning on that. We've actually mentioned those a little bit before, but firewalls are there to prevent and allow traffic in and out of your network or your device. Because remember, you can have firewalls on the network as a separate device, and you can also have your software firewalls within your devices, and ACLs count on those too. So they talk a little bit about those. That firewalls are going to packet filter, where they look at IP addresses or MAC addresses, and yes, they're saying packet there, although MAC addresses are really on frames, but that's as in a packet data unit, okay? And then they mentioned application filtering, where you make sure that this is types of applications that should be communicating back and forth with each other, and it could be also on a URL. Is that a URL somebody is permitted to go to or not? Your firewall in an organization should prevent your employees from going to porn sites. For instance, you may not allow them to go to political sites. You may not allow them to go to other things. Ironically, in the school here, is a lot of our students are attending school on Hope Grant and Hope scholarships, which are paid by the lottery, and we cannot access lottery websites. So we can't go to the lottery website, but that's where most of our money is probably coming from. And then they mentioned endpoint security, that, like I said, you've got software firewalls also. You've got other things that you can set up on your endpoints to protect them too. Okay. And then they mentioned device security. And so they mentioned about Cisco Auto Secure. They mentioned here to you, but I'll tell you this one on that one. That one's really available on lower level Cisco devices than what we've been using in this class and the next two classes. So you're really not going to use Cisco Auto Secure, but it's out there for the ones that aren't as high a level devices as what we use. Passwords, they throw you a little bit about that and about how you should make those. That their recommendation is at least 8 characters. They said preferably 10 or more characters. School here makes me do a 12-character password, and I just had to change it right before I came into this class today. Make them complex, so they use upper and lowercase letters, special characters, numbers, etc. And they list spaces there, but I'd be careful on that one. And a lot of times that won't work anyway. And they say don't use dictionary words and some other type things on it where they're easily identifiable. And they mention about deliberately misspell words, or actually what they tell you to do is get a phrase and then change it where you've changed characters around different things. And change them regularly. Don't use the same password forever on whatever, although lots of us do. So they give you some information on that. And they mention about in your organization, set minimum password lengths, encrypt all your plain text passwords, and make it where that you really can't use a brute force or a dictionary attack. In a dictionary attack, they literally are using dictionary to go through words it knows and see if those are the word, if that's the actual password. The other one is set it where they only get so many attempts on the password, and then it locks the account. But unless your help desk wants to be hounded by it, just set that where you've locked it, just set it for a limited amount of time. Now, I do see that abused sometimes, because one place I worked had it where if you put in the wrong password 3 times, it locked your account for 20 minutes. Well, there were a number of people in the organization figured out, come in at the last minute to go to work, type in the password 3 times wrong, and then they could go down the hall for 20 minutes and get a cup of coffee and come back and start working. Instead of showing up early, getting the cup of coffee and going down and starting working at 8 o'clock like they should have. And they mentioned about using SSH, which we talked about just in the previous chapter or so. And then they mention about disable any services you don't use, just like disable any ports you don't use. Okay. And those both go back to back on it. And that there is chapter 16. And it looks like it's about 7 minutes till 12. Questions for me on all of that? I just gave you a lot of information. So, because that chapter goes on and leads into entire courses. Like I say, 1601 pretty well covers a lot of things in there, but not everything, because some of the network type things actually gets covered more in my 2601 class I'm teaching this semester, that I'm not sure if any of y'all are in, but I know some of the people in your class are taking that one also. And then that other parts on that, and that it also leads into an entire degree that we give in cybersecurity. So it expands out to a lot of stuff. The next chapter should be really simple for y'all, and that you're going to go through, and like I say, it combines things you've done in Packet Tracer all together into one thing, where you'll build the network. You'll put the devices in, and then you'll set the things up on the devices. And so they're putting it all together to let you see in terms of actually creating a network, instead of what you've done through the book, where they've already got stuff sitting there for you and then you were just connecting it together. But you're going, well, I'm not sure how all of this stuff, and then I learned this part here, I learned this part here, I learned this part here. Now they're going to take it and put it all together into one thing where you can see how it all fits together, is the idea of the chapter. So most of what they show you in that chapter, we've already seen through the book. So next Monday should be a pretty short session, but again, it does not count for a grade at all for you. So there's not a requirement for you to attend, but you're more than welcome to attend. And I will conduct the session and do the recording like normal. And about panicked right there for a second, because I was going, did I record today or not? And I did. All right. If there's no other questions, you all said the answers I got back said that you didn't have any. Just as a reminder, make sure you do register if you're not registered for summer, so that you can make sure you get in your classes and everything's set. Summer will start on May 17th. Most of the computer classes run for 8 weeks, although there is an instructor or two, I think, runs them for the 10 weeks. My classes will be 8 weeks, so we'll finish somewhere around July the 17th or something on that, on it. So, and hopeful, and it looks like that I'll be around pretty much for on the summer. I'm hoping to go to Salt Lake City for a week in late June for the Kiwanis International Conference. But they say they're going to have it. They've cut it back. But then I've heard rumor the other day of the guy that is above me, because I'm vice governor right now, and the guy that's governor told me he was told don't make your hotel reservation and stuff yet, which inclines me to think they're thinking they may still call it off for general people going to it. So I'm waiting on that. But there's an online class I want to take during that week, but I'll be in the classes all that week also, because actually on Server 2019, it collides with that, and I'm going, great. So I went ahead and signed up for it, and then I can decide by June the 10th which one I'm doing. Because if I don't sign up for it, it may well fill up, and then I can't get into it. And if the other falls through. But I'd really like to go out there, and then I can work on classes at night, every night while I'm going out there and coming back. And while I'm out there, I can work at different times. So I'll be fully accessible during that time. I'll be taking some leave, and I'll be doing some other stuff because I'm going to drive. The BB gun match that I usually miss at least a few days before the 4th of July. On Friday, they canceled it for this year. They're saying they're going to have a really big and wonderful match next year for their biggest one. Well, Todd, just for your information, when I grow up, I want to find out what's the one thing I want to do and really go for one thing and figure out what it is that I want to be when I'm grown up. So I would
Everything.
Okay.
You're so busy.
So then that can be a hassle at times. And then there's other little things that get in life too. So I don't know what all, because I know I've got a couple of things that may be coming up on me that may have me slowed down a little or have me doing some a little bit different on. But I'm involved in lots of stuff because everything I try to do things that I enjoy. So I am, as I told y'all earlier in the session, I am taking an AWS class this semester that I will take the certification exam for as soon as the semester ends, training ends, which I think runs 15 weeks. And I'm actually on chapter 3, which was supposed to be finished last week, and I'm trying to finish it today. And then I got to get chapter 4 done this week. And I think I just got to watch another video too and take their short little quiz on it at this point and post on their discussion board. And then I'll have 3 done, but then I got to get going with 4.
Wow.
So lots of things going on. Take advantage of your opportunities out there and watch. If y'all haven't, I have continued posting different things on the general discussion board. So I would encourage you to keep your eye on that. Okay.
Thank you so much.
So I will see I'll see probably most of you next week, because I suspect most of you will come and listen to catch the last information on that chapter that, yeah, you're doing this to get out of doing the discussion, but you're also doing it because here's your chance to actually hear it from me or ask questions online with me.
Absolutely.
So I know there's a mixture on that of why y'all do the Collaborate live sessions. So I will see you next week. I will try to get the final lab posted real shortly on it. And then I've got another session at 1 o'clock. So, and I've got a couple other things to try to squeeze in here real quick between there too. Okay. Any questions? If not, have a good week.
Thanks.
And we'll see what all happens during the week.
All right. Thanks.
And I am stopping the recording.